So we went on this cruise back in August. It's probably a once-in-a-lifetime cruise, so we were really, really thorough about picking out what we were going to do, and we found this one excursion that we wanted to do, and it's like, oh, this is what we want to do. And what it was it's like the Cinque Terre area. If you know anything about that, it's called the 5 villages. And if you think about the pink, blue, pastel villages, like the stuff that all the movies are about, that's that area. And the excursion was you get picked up by a sailboat, and there's only like 10 people on the sailboat, and they go to all these villages, and you get to get off a couple of times, and then they stop and you swim in a couple of different areas and you have lunch. And I was very insistent that the one thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to swim in the Mediterranean. I don't care what else we do. If I'm going there, I'm going to swim. Probably the only time we're ever going to do this, I'm going to swim in the Mediterranean. And we did get to do that. And Britt kicked an octopus while we were in the Mediterranean, which made it even better. I'm very grateful that she did that. I can't think of a better way to have done that. So we've got this excursion picked out, and there's a problem with it, though, is we can do it on one of 2 different days, which it would have been better if there was only one option, right? Because this is a once-in-a-lifetime trip. It's a once-in-a-lifetime trip. So we want to do everything we can. And the problem is there's 2 days we can do it on. So which day are we going to do it? Well, we got to decide what we're going to do on the other day. So we're not going to pick the thing that we want to do until we figure out what we're going to do the other day. But you don't just figure out what you're going to do on the other day. You got to look at everything you could do on either day and decide what you want to do on either day the most, and then you pick the other thing, right? Which is a lot of work. It's a lot of YouTube videos. It's a lot of reading blogs. It's a lot of TripAdvisor time. So we figure out the one thing we want to do, and then we say, we're going to research and we're going to figure out the others. And so there would be a day where it's like, okay, she says, we need to take some time and figure this out. I'm like, I'm just exhausted. I don't know that I can sit through hours of YouTube videos and figure this out today. Let's do it another day. And I'm ready, and she says, I say, let's do it. And she says, I don't know that I'm ready. I don't know that I've got the energy to do this today. And it just goes on and on and on. And then the day comes where we're both ready. We both got the time. We're both ready to do this. And so we go through and we watch hours of YouTube videos one day, going through the cities and watching tour videos and trying to figure out people's accents as they go through and do these things. Because the girl that does the best job on these videos, I can't understand a word she says. So we figure out what we want to do, like the secondary thing. And we pick out the day that we want to do it, and we figure out what day we want to do this big excursion that we want to do. And now that we got it all done, we go to book it, and it is gone. Like, oh no, what are we going to do? Figure out how to do it a different way. Let's go to the other day. Who cares about the secondary excursion? Let's go. Let's just pick it out on the other day. And it's gone on the other day too. So let's find a similar one. Let's take lower quality. Let's one with more people, and they're gone. We were so concerned about making sure that we could do the thing that we cared less about doing, the thing that was less important to us, and making sure we got the most out of it, that we missed out on the thing that we wanted to do the most. Don't feel too bad about us. Don't feel too bad for us. We still went to Europe. We still got to do a great excursion. We got to go to our thing that ended up being our favorite, and it turned out to be free, so it worked out. But I think I will always regret not getting to go on that sunset private boat, swimming in the Mediterranean in multiple private coves. I'll always regret that. And it's because I was more concerned with the things that didn't matter than I was with the thing that did matter. I knew what mattered most, but I thought I had plenty of time. There are plenty of opportunities for the thing that matters. But there might be something out there I like too. And the thing is, I didn't even know what was out there. I didn't even know if there was something good out there. I had to go look it up and figure out if there was something out there I might like. Because I didn't know. And so I missed out on something I knew I would love because I was looking for something that might be enjoyable. It worked out. But some of you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? There are some of you parents of adults that know exactly what I'm talking about. There are some of you that are reaching a certain age in your life, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. That there is a thing that matters most, and you thought you had plenty of time. And because you thought you had plenty of time on the thing that matters most, you chased things that mattered less, and now the thing that mattered most is gone, and you can't have it anymore. And if you could go back in time and talk to yourself 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 20 years ago, you would tell yourself, book the excursion now. There is nothing out there that you're going to find that you want more than you want that. And you might miss out on a couple of things that you would enjoy, but if you don't stop going back and forth between two opinions and looking for things that you might like, you're going to miss out on something that you're going to love. And it's going to be too late. I could stop preaching there, right? We could just be done. We're going through the life of Elijah, and we're going through and looking at the way that his life works out and the way that he does things, and getting to where he's at. And he's a cool guy. He does a lot of cool stuff, and we're at the climax of his story, but we're not at the end of his story. And so far, he's shown up out of nowhere. He's confronted an evil king, and he's disappeared into the wilderness and then into another country, and now he's come back. And it's time to face off, because what happened was the king led the nation into idolatry, led them into evil practices, got them into an alliance with another evil nation, married an evil woman that killed all the prophets. Well, not all the prophets that she could get to. And he's come back, and God sent a drought for 3.5 years. It's caused them a bunch of problems to try to get them to come back. And now he's come back to confront them. And that's what we're going to pick up. So we'll just jump in. In 1 Kings, you went to sleep, you stupid computer. Wake up. We're in 1 Kings chapter 18, and we're going to start in verse 17. When Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, "Is it you, you troubler of Israel?" And in verse 18, that's Elijah, answered, "I have not troubled Israel, but you have." You are. "But you have in your father's house, because you have abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals." That's probably Baals, but I've grown up saying Baal my whole life, and I'm too old to change now. So, you have abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals. Now, therefore, send and gather all Israel to me at Mount Carmel. And that's probably Carmel, but I'm going to say Carmel. "And the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." Jezebel is his wife. And so what has happened is, generally the kings of Israel, they take care of the priests of God. They supply them with food. They make sure they're taken care of. But she came in and said, we're not doing that anymore. We're going to use all those resources, and we're bringing in priests of Baal and Asherah, and we're going to take care of them. Baal and Asherah were a false god, false goddess. They're a married couple, so those priests and priestesses work together. So we're going to bring them in. So when you see one, you're thinking about the other. They always go together, fairly faithful, good marriage, I guess. So they always work together. He said, "I want you to bring all of them to me, and we're going to work together." Now, when you read this, it seems like they're just being like, "You're the bad guy." No, you're the bad. Like they're throwing names at each other. This word troubler, though, is closer to traitor. So when he says this, sees him and says, "Traitor," and he says, "No, you're the traitor." Okay, and you got to understand the really complex. We would call it a constitutional crisis that they've got going on here, because this isn't just two guys yelling at each other. The way that Israel was originally set up was it was a theological libertarian paradise was intended to be, right? Where there's no way to set up new laws. God set up the laws and said, nobody's making new laws. You're just going to have the laws that I set up. Everybody's going to do their own thing, and we'll have judges that decide whether or not you're following my laws or not. You don't get to make up new laws. We're not going to have a chief executive. We're just going to have prophets and priests who come in and interpret my laws, and whenever y'all mess up, I'll send in a military leader who acts as a judge and also a rescuer that comes in, and basically it's that. So it's libertarianism in that there's no new laws, and you all just do whatever I say, and I'm the ultimate executive. And he would have prophets that come in, and the prophets would come in and act sometimes as judges, sometimes as prophets, but they were the representative of God. And so the last one that they had that was really the ruler over Israel is Samuel. Samuel is the ruler over Israel. Some things go bad, and the people say, we want a king. And God says, you really don't want a king, because a king's going to come in, and they're going to make new laws. They're going to be in charge. I have not made a new law in hundreds of years, but they're going to do whatever they want to do. They're going to take your sons and daughters and tell them what to do. They're going to take your people as slaves. They're going to take your land. They're going to be in charge. They're going to make new laws. But I haven't made any new laws in years. You know what's going on. You know what to expect from me. You do your own thing. I tell you what's right and wrong. We go from there. They're going to mess things up. You don't want this. And they said, yes, we do. We would really like to have somebody in charge who can make things worse. And he said, okay. So they got a new king. But even if they did that, they would still have prophets. So there's always this tension between the king and the prophet of God. So whenever Saul was the first king was there, Samuel would come around and Saul would get nervous because the prophet was the executive before the king. And so there's this tension, like, who do we listen to? Because the people knew that the prophet spoke on behalf of God. So the king would get nervous. And the king never really went against the prophet unless he wanted to have a showdown between himself and God. And so the prophet kind of did his own thing and would stay in his own lane and do religious stuff unless he needed to confront the king. And sometimes the king would be feeling his Wheaties and would confront the prophet, and that would go badly. And sometimes he would kill the prophet, and things would not work out well for him. So they kind of left it alone. But this is one of the few times where you have the people have recognized that the prophet represents God, is Elijah, directly confronts the king, and they're against each other. And so the king, who's the ruler, says, you're a traitor because you've opposed me. And the prophet says, no, you're a traitor because you've opposed God. And they've got this constitutional crisis. I said, what do we do? Who's in charge? Who's the one that gets to decide what's going on? So he says, I want you to gather everybody up, and we're going to decide who's actually the traitor here, who is actually the source of all the problems. Is the prophet who represents God the one that actually is speaking on behalf of God, the one that's actually representing the interests of the nation, or is the king, who's the actual executive of the nation, the one who's in charge and gets to decide who's the traitor? We're going to gather everybody up. I have not troubled Israel, but you have, and your father's house, because you've abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals. You've rejected the covenant with God. You've rejected the God that brought us here and set up this nation. You are the problem, not me. Now, therefore, send and gather all Israel to me at Mount Carmel, and the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. This is a bold move because what does he do? He commands the king to do something. When it says gather all Israel, you can do what you want to with this, but most likely he's not saying get every person in Israel. When this is used generally, this means get all the leadership together. It probably doesn't mean the millions of people that live in Israel at this point. They probably didn't drop everything they were doing, bring every man, woman, and child there. There's really not room for everything that's about to happen. But you can believe it means all people if you want to. I don't know how they would hear what's about to happen and how things are going to work. But generally what that means is bring all the leadership there. So he says, I want you to bring everybody here. Go do this right now. And you would think Ahab would be like, don't tell me what to do. But instead, he does what he says. Now, I want to show you this because where he tells them to meet is important too, and it's going to be important for what we tell them. He says, I want you to get them to go to Mount Carmel. Now, you can see this map, and I don't want to get too detailed because you can't read any of this. But what I want you to see is what's going on and where he's going to have them meet. Now, you can see the yellow part on the left there, that's Israel, okay? The yellow part on the right, that's the boonies, okay? That's where Elijah came from when he came in out of nowhere. On the left part, right up there at the top, you can see that pink part. That's Phoenicia, okay? And that's important because that's where Jezebel came from, okay? That's where Elijah's been hiding up in Zarephath. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. That's where he's been hiding. That is the place that Ahab made a political alliance with. That's the country of Baal, okay? That's his territory. And right below that, you can see some red writing. Right there on the border, that's Mount Carmel. So when he says, I want you to gather everybody up, he doesn't say, I want you to come to the middle of Israel. He doesn't say, I want you to come to the capital. He says, I want you to come right there on the border, because what we're about to do is not just for the people of Israel to see. I want to prove to the people of Israel, and I want to prove to the people of the other nations that worship Baal, the capital of Baal worship right up there. I want everybody to see this, because I'm going to prove to everyone who the actual God in this situation is. Is it Baal, or is it Yahweh, the God of Israel? This is not just for the audience of Israel, but for the people that have been polluting Israel with this thing for a long time. It's also important to know this about Mount Carmel, is that this is Baal's mountain. Okay, this is the one that, he's a storm god, at least they say he's a storm god, and so whenever the storms blow in off the Mediterranean, that the storms hit right there, and so there's lightning and thunder, and he's this thunder god. He's like Zeus, he's a lightning and thunder god. And so the storms hit right there on that mountain, and there's lightning and thunder on top of the mountain. It's like, oh, that's Baal. And they've been really upset about this for a long time, because for hundreds of years, the people of Yahweh had held the mountain of Baal, and the people of Phoenicia have been upset about this because their enemies have held their God's mountain. But now they feel like they've taken it back because the people of Israel have been worshiping Baal. It's like, oh yeah, our God's victorious because he took back his territory. But Elijah said, hey, your storm god has not been able to bring rain for 3.5 years, and now we're going to go to his house, and we're going to decide whether he's actually a god or not. So it's really important that you understand this, because what we're going to talk about later is that he didn't go to Samaria, he didn't go to the capital, he didn't go to the middle territory. He went right up there where everybody could watch what he's about to do. So let's go on and see what he said. So Ahab sent to all the people of Israel and gathered the prophets together at Mount Carmel. And I find this hilarious. This big bad king who wants to kill everybody, who thinks he's in charge, immediately does what Elijah tells him to do. Like, he doesn't try to kill him in secret, but he says, you traitor, I'm going to kill you. And Elijah says, go get everybody, tell them to come over here so we can work this out. He says, yes, sir. He goes and gets everybody and brings them over. Like, what a man. And Elijah came near to all the people and said, how long will you go limping between two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal, then follow him. And the people did not answer him a word. Now, I told you this a couple of weeks ago, but I want you to notice something. That all caps Lord, right? That's not the word Lord, that means Yahweh. That's the name of God. So anytime you see that, that means that they had too much respect for the name of God to do what God told them to do and just say his name, okay? If Yahweh is God, that's the name of God. If Yahweh is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. And the people did not answer him a word. We get this idea that they would, like when you read the Old Testament, they would stop worshiping Yahweh and they would start worshiping something else. That's not what happened. Generally, that's not what happened. You get your Jezebels, and she's like, no, I'm all in on evil. But most of the time, they weren't all in on evil. They would go to the temple, they would go to worship on Saturday, on the Sabbath. And then they would worship other stuff the rest of the day of the week. They never really gave up on what they were doing. They just added stuff on. They would limp back and forth between two opinions. They would worship Yahweh some of the time, and they're like, hey, we did our thing. We checked our box. We're good to go. And then they would go worship other things. And Elijah said, God's not cool with that. He is not like this. The way the illustration that's used throughout the prophets in the Old Testament, the way they would talk about it is like you're married. It's like a man who's married, okay? Or generally as a woman who's married, because that's the way it's set up. But let's say a woman who's married to a man, and what she would do is she would be married, be with her husband, then she would go have an affair, and spend time with her lovers, and then she comes back and spends the night in bed with her husband. And then she goes back out with her lovers, and then she comes back in with her husband. That's the way that God sees this relationship. And they say it's not a big deal because we still show up and we sleep in the bed with our husband at night. We still show up and we're with our husband. We still honor the marriage. We're still cooking dinner. We're still doing chores. We're still doing everything we want to. We just mess around a little bit on the side. They say it's not that big of a deal because we still worship Yahweh. And Elijah shows up and says, it is a big deal. It's not okay. You don't get to have Yahweh and then add in other gods on the side. You don't get to do this. You have to pick one. And you know this. You know this isn't okay. The first commandment that God gave them is, I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. The second command is that you shall make no graven images, no idols. Don't make anything don't even carve any statues, because you people will start worshiping it even if it didn't start out as as an idol in the first place. You just start worshiping everything. Don't even make any statues, because you get confused and you'll start worshiping it. Nothing. You know that you can't do this. You know it's not okay for you to spend the night at home with your husband and then go have other lovers on the side. You know that's not okay. You have to pick. You can't limp back and forth between two opinions. And the people know it's not okay because they just close their mouths. They say nothing. It was politically expedient for them to just do whatever the king and the queen said to do, and then they would still do their thing, and they said they were faithful because you know what? It's a really tough climate. Politically, it's a really tough climate. We'll just wait out this king and queen and things will get better and we'll go back to it and God will understand because it's really tough. But we'll just be secret believers, or we'll just do this on the Sabbath and we'll just keep it to ourselves, but God will understand. And Elijah says, no, we don't get to do this. You got to pick. You can't keep going back and forth. And the people who know this keep their mouths shut. In verse 22, Elijah said to the people, even I only am left a prophet of the Lord, but Baal's prophets are 450 men. Now, if you've been here over the past couple of weeks, you know that's not true, right? You remember last week. You know that's not true? You remember last week whenever he met Obadiah and what Obadiah said to him? He said, I have hidden 100 prophets of the Lord. I've hidden 100 prophets of the Lord and taken care of them, because what Jezebel wanted to do is she wanted to kill all the prophets because she couldn't find Elijah. She wanted to kill everybody else. But Elijah says, I am the only one here. I'm the only one. He doesn't say I'm the only one here. He says, I'm the only one left. He repeats this again in chapter 19 when he's talking to God. He says it twice. He says, I am the only prophet. I'm the only one working. I'm the only one serving. And we're going to talk about this in a couple of weeks, what he's dealing with, but I just want to explain this to you for just a second, okay? Here's what I think is happening here, because he knows, because Obadiah just told him there's 100 other guys. And if you read commentaries, what they'll say is that he's saying, I'm the only one that's here, that he's saying that he's the only one that's left. That's wrong, because he doesn't say I'm the only one that's here. He says I'm the only one left, and he repeats it again. I'm pretty positive what's happening is that he's dealing with depression and burnout, because I've sat with people in my office who said the same thing to me. I sat with a couple one day, and they were very big volunteers in the church. They did a lot of stuff, but they were going through a lot of stuff. And one of them said, nobody talks to me anymore. Nobody else does anything around here. It's all me. Nobody reaches out to me. Nobody checks on me. And the spouse said, actually, somebody texted you the other day. They, other than them. And I said, well, actually, I know this person called you the other day because they told me that they called you. Well, they didn't mean it. I know other people are working because I've seen them do this, but they just do it and they don't care. This is called cognitive contraction. It's called tunnel focus. And what happens when you start to get burnt out or you go into depression is you lose the ability to see the people around you. And it seems like nobody else cares about you. And it seems like nobody else is doing anything. So what you do is you are doing something and you're doing it at a high level and you're working and you really care about it and you start to get really tired, you start to get depressed, you start to get burnt out, and you lose the ability to see that anybody else is working or that anybody else cares about you. You lose the ability to see that even when it's pointed out to you, even when you're told, hey, there's 100 other people over there working. You're like, well, what they're doing doesn't matter. They're not really working. They're hiding in a cave. Bro, you've been out of the country for 3.5 years, living with a widow and her kid. You haven't done anything. But what I care, and they don't care. And you lose the ability to see anybody else because you just get constricted, and then you get constricted, and because you feel alone, you make yourself alone. And you isolate yourself and you reinforce what you already feel and prove yourself right. And then you break relationships because you're hurt and you're angry and you prove yourself even more right. And then by the time you come out of it and realize what you've done, it's too late. And you either have to be really, really mature and go back and fix a bunch of stuff, or you do what most people do and you're super immature about it and you just walk away and start over. And we're going to talk about that in a few weeks, but I just want to point out what he's dealing with right here is he's really, really tired and he's really emotional and he's had a really hard 3.5 years and he's depressed and he's burnt out and he cannot see, even whenever somebody else tells him there's 100 other guys here that would love to be on that mountain with you, but you have not invited them to that mountain. Even when you see there's 100 other guys there, because of what you're dealing with, you can't see it. I want you to know one of the primary things that I look for when it comes to our volunteers or other pastors is I look for this right here. I am alone and nobody else cares. I am the only one is one of the primary things I look for. And if you're feeling that way, I am alone and no one else cares, there's nobody else. If you feel that way, here's what I want you to know. That's a red flag, and you need to get some help before you start breaking things. And I'll help you if you'll let me. And there are other people that'll help you. And we're going to spend a lot more time on that in a couple of weeks. But if you see that in yourself right now, understand you're wrong, and you need some help before it goes any further. Because Elijah is at the peak of his ministry, but he's also at the point that he is about to break. And we're going to see him break. And if he had a friend there to tell him before he got to that point, you're about to break, things might have gone a little bit differently for him. Because in 2 weeks, he's going to be asking for God to kill him. And the first sign of it is right here. I am alone. No, you're not. There's 100 other guys that would love to be on that mountain with you. And you might feel alone, but you're not. It's another sermon. He said, even I only am left a prophet of the Lord, but Baal's prophets are 450 men. Let 2 bulls be given to us, and let them choose 1 bull for themselves and cut it in pieces and lay it on the wood and put no fire to it. And I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood and put no fire to it. And you can call upon the name of your God, and I will call upon the name of the Lord. And the God who answers by fire, he is God. And the people answered, it is well spoken. First time they bothered to talk. They have not said a word so far. They go, this is going to be good. Yeah, that's a good plan. That's a good plan, dude. That's good. Let's build 2 altars and let's let them call fire. We're going to put wood and we're going to put beef and we're going to wait for whichever one can call fire from heaven. And hey, he's given the advantage to Baal here because we're on Baal's mountain. We're at his house. Right? He's a lightning god. Like this should be easy for him. We'll let him go first. And if he gets it first, obviously he's the winner, right? We're in his territory. Let's let it go. And the prophets of Baal, they don't chime in, but the people are all like, yeah, this sounds good. This sounds like exactly what we need to do. So in verse 25, Elijah says to the prophets of Baal, choose for yourself 1 bull and prepare it first, for you are many. Call upon the name of your God and put no fire to it. And they took the bull that was given to them and they prepared it, and they called upon the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, "O Baal, answer us." But there was no voice, and no one answered. And they limped around the altar that they had made. So they do the thing, and they go for about 3 hours. Now, what's really interesting, if you pay attention to this and you like to be a Bible nerd about this kind of stuff, is the timeline echoes the timeline of Jesus on the cross. From the time they start till noon, and noon was when darkness fell while Jesus was on the cross, and then from noon until 3, and Jesus died at 3 o'clock, and the way the timeline's going to work out here is about the same. So they do their sacrifice till about 3 o'clock, and then Elijah doesn't really say anything until about 3 o'clock, and then about 3 o'clock he starts talking. Now Jeremiah writes this. He's the one that writes 1st and 2nd Kings, and he thinks he's funny because he uses the same word for limping between two opinions to describe the way that they go around the thing. He's got jokes, so he thinks he's funny. But the way that they worshipped is like a lot of stuff that you would see on TV about pagan worship. They do a lot of dancing. They do a lot of getting high and all that kind of stuff, dancing and doing all kinds of craziness around there. So they're running around, they're jumping, they're screaming, doing all this stuff, trying to get Baal to pay attention, and there is no voice and no one answers. But then in verse 27, Elijah has been quiet for a few hours, but at noon Elijah mocks them, saying, "Cry aloud, for he is God." This is more like, why don't you yell louder? Because surely he's a God, right? Surely he can hear you. Surely he's musing, or he's in the bathroom. He's relieving himself, or he's on a journey, or perhaps he's asleep and must be awakened. Maybe he's working in his dream journal and he can't hear you, or he's in the bathroom, or maybe he went to go visit a friend, like he's taking a trip. Like maybe you should yell louder so that he can hear you. And they cried aloud, they yelled louder, and they cut themselves after their custom with swords and lances until the blood gushed out upon them. And as midday passed, they raved on until the time of the offering of the oblation, but there was no voice, no one answered, and no one paid attention. The time of the oblation, what that means is that 3 o'clock was the last sacrifice in the temple of the day. So at 3 o'clock, they started the temple sacrifice at 9 o'clock in Jerusalem at 9 o'clock. They would offer the first sacrifice. That's also the time that Jesus was put on the cross. They offered the first lamb sacrifice. They would sacrifice all day until 3 o'clock, and at 3 o'clock, they offered the final sacrifice. Also, at 3 o'clock, even if you couldn't be in Jerusalem, this is a national moment of prayer. So even if you couldn't be there, the entire nation is supposed to stop and pray at this moment. But they don't do that. But at 3 o'clock, at the time of national moment of prayer, at the time that sacrifice is supposed to happen, Elijah takes over. And in verse 30, Elijah says to all the people, "Come near to me." And all the people came near to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. So he picks a spot where there had originally been an altar to Yahweh. We don't know anything about this. It's just a place where they had worshiped at some point. And he takes it, and he takes 12 stones, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord came, saying, "Israel shall be your name." And this is a politically significant moment because the 12 tribes were not together at this point. They'd been split into 2 kingdoms. But he does this thing that illustrates the fact that they're one people, they're not 2 kingdoms. He brings them back together to illustrate that they're one people and they should be one people. And with the stones, he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he made a trench about the altar as great as would contain 2 seahs of seed. And I spent an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out how big that trench is. And I did not like the answers I came up with because I don't agree with them. So we just know it's a trench, right? And then in verse 33, I disagree with them, but I can't figure out what the right answer is. He put the wood in order and cut the bull in pieces and laid on the wood. And he said, "Fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood." And I had some problems with this too, because where are they getting water in a 3.5-year drought? But the thing about Mount Carmel is it has water all year. Even in droughts now, it has water because of the way the springs are in the limestone. You just can't get it anywhere. It'd be fine if you had an aqueduct, you could get it to the farm, but you can't. It just has water all year long. So they pour somewhere around, I'm guessing 40 gallons of water on this thing. So they pour about 40 gallons of water on it. Could be 50. Make up your own number if you want to. So they pour all this water on it. Do it a second time, do it a third time, do it a third time. And the water ran down the altar and filled the trench also with water. Then at the time, verse 36, at the time of the offering of the oblation, Elijah the prophet came near and said, and what he really wants us to do is he wants to compare the two different types of prayers, right? Theirs is hooping and hollering and running around and screaming and bloodletting and doing all this stuff for hours to try to get anything out of their God. But Elijah's prayer is quiet and small and clear. O Lord, Yahweh, all caps, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back. This is the prayer. Yahweh, let them know that you're God. Let them know that I am not the traitor, that I'm your servant, that I didn't bring all this on them because I'm some mad, evil prophet, but I did this because you told me to. And bring their hearts back to you. That's the prayer. No screaming, no dancing, just show yourself and bring them back. And then verse 38. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering and the wood and the stones and the dust and licked up the water that was in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, Yahweh, I'm going to read that right. Yahweh, He is God. Yahweh, He is God. And Elijah said to them, seize the prophets of Baal. Let not one of them escape. And they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slaughtered them there. And they dealt with their prophet infestation. He said, you people have got to pick a lane because you keep going back and forth between two opinions. You think it's okay to worship God on Saturday and then go do what you want the rest of the time. But this thing that you're worshiping is nothing. It can do nothing for you, and it's robbing you of your relationship with the one who can actually do something for you. So my prayer for you is this, that you will see that the one who is actually something, He is actually something, and that you will be able to turn back to Him, that you'll have the courage to step away from these things that are nothing and come back to Him. And that you will remove those things from your life that are leading you astray. That's the whole story. And it's dramatic, and there's fire, and there's mockery, and there's allegory, and there's all these things, and it's great. But as I'm reading this story that's really cool and really dramatic and would make a great episode of TV and all of that, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, what do I tell you to do with this? And I go back to this prayer. And when I look and say, like, what do I actually tell you to do with this? The prayer is the thing that I go back to. The prayer that says, show them that you're the God that can actually do something. And give them the strength to turn back to you. I don't know who's calling me right now. Show them that you're the God that can actually do them, and give them the strength to turn away from those other things and turn back to you. There's two audiences to this story. One is the Phoenicians, the people that invented the alphabet, although they wouldn't want it called the alphabet because that's a Greek name for it. But the Phoenicians, the ones that are watching this from a distance, that are watching their God be defeated. The people that did not know that their God wasn't real. The people that did not know that it was a problem to have multiple gods. And maybe that's you. Maybe you didn't grow up in this. You didn't know it was a problem. Maybe you didn't know that you need to be 100% all in on this. That God does not allow multiple gods. That He wants to be 100% all that you have. That there is only one way to the Father, and that is through the Son. Maybe that's you. And if that's you, you can be forgiven for not knowing that you can't pick and choose from day to day. That you can't just say, I'm going to cover all my bases by picking one God and another God, and then I'm just going to show up to church. I'm going to make sure I'm baptized. I'm going to make sure I show up and give some money and do this and pray once in a while. You can be forgiven for not knowing that. But I'm going to tell you right now that what He has for you is life and life abundantly, or do your own thing and don't bother with Him. Because you cannot come for Him and marry him and then run around on him. That's not the way it works. It's either all or nothing. You are a sinner. The punishment for sin is eternal hell and death. But he offers you a way to receive forgiveness, and that is by trusting him with everything. You cry out to him for forgiveness and rescue, and he will do that. But the way that you do that is by trusting him with everything. That you are not enough and you need him to cover everything. And so if you've been doing this thing and you're like, well, I've been baptized and I'm going to come to church to cover my bases, that's not doing it. And I'm happy to sit down with you and talk to you more detailed on that. But I need you to know that as the Phoenician in this story, you cannot waffle back and forth between two opinions on this and say my bases are covered. It's all or nothing. And maybe you're the Israelite. And you say, but Ben, I'm not the Israelite. I don't worship Baal. I don't even worship Sam Walton. Have you been to the museum and seen that holograph thing that we've got? That's crazy. I don't even worship Sam Walton or any of the other idols we've got set around here. I am not that guy. So it's not me. Okay, cool. Let me ask you some questions. If you and I were to do something incredibly uncomfortable for you, like let's sit down in my office and let's go through your credit card statement and your bank statement. Jesus said that where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Let's go through your credit card statement and your bank statement, and let's see if I can tell that you worship Jesus by looking at how you spend your money. Would I be able to tell? Is there anything about the way you spend your money that would indicate that you live your life according to the principles that God has laid out, that you worship him with your money, that your treasure is with him? Is there anything about your money that would indicate that you care about this church, that you care that your money is dedicated to other people and not just yourself? Is there anything about your money that says that you use your money in such a way that you reserve some in case he tells you to do something with your money? Or do you just spend every dime of it that comes in on yourself? We can't say penny more because we don't have those, right? Every dime of it that comes in is for you and what you can spend it on. If I were to follow you around and watch how you spoke to your husband or wife, just followed you around and watch how you spoke to your husband or wife, watch how you lived your marriage, is there anything about your marriage that would tell me that you worship Jesus? Or is that just a Sunday thing? And your marriage is just made up of what makes your life easier and what gets you what you want? If I watch how you parent your kids, would I see anything about the way that you parent your kids that says that you worship Jesus? That you want them to grow up to worship Jesus too? Or you outsource all of that to what happens over there on Sundays and Wednesdays? Is there anything about the way that you parent your kids that says that you want them to grow up to follow Jesus? Or do you just want them to be quiet and stop bothering you? Do you leave that to the teacher at school and whoever happens to be volunteering on Sunday morning? If I followed you around at work, is there anything about the way that you work, the way that you speak to people at work, the way that you share the gospel at work, the way that you pray for people at work, that would indicate to me that you're a follower of Jesus? Or is that a Sunday thing? I don't think you worship a statue. I don't think you kneel down to Baal. But I wonder if I followed you around and I went through your money and I watched, I wonder how embarrassed you would be. Do you limp back and forth between two opinions? Here's a good thing. God's relationship with them is a little bit different than it was with us. He said, you be My people, I'll be your God. And whenever you decide that you don't want me to be your God anymore, you're on your own. But I don't lose my forgiveness and I don't lose my salvation whenever I decide that I'm going to limp back and forth between my two opinions. But I lose a lot of opportunity, and I lose a lot of peace, and I lose a lot of growth. And if you've actually put your trust in Jesus, you don't have to worry that because you worship Jesus on Sunday and do a whole lot of other stuff the rest of the week that you've lost your salvation. But you might need to consider whether you're saved in the first place. And if you actually are, you need to consider what opportunities you're missing with the time you're wasting. I really wanted to go on that boat. And I know you got things you really want for your kids, and you really want for your marriage, and you really want for those people at work, and you really want for your money. I know you've got ways that you really want to worship Jesus through those things, and you think you've got plenty of time, but you don't. Stop waiting. Stop limping between two opinions and pick a lane. Because you don't have forever. And I'm telling you that if you will pick, that when you get the thing that matters, you won't spend that time wondering about the thing that you missed out on. But you'll be excited about the thing that you chose. Stand with me, please. Our Heavenly Father, we come before you, and I'm so grateful for your grace and your patience and your mercy. I ask that you'd help us. I ask that you would show us who you are. And I know there are people in the room, I believe there are people in the room that don't know you, that don't understand. And I ask, as Elijah asked today, Lord, I ask that you would show them. I don't know that lightning's going to be the best way to do that, but you know what you're doing, Lord. And I just ask that you would show them the truth about who you are. As you said in Romans chapter 1, that you have made the truth evident. And I ask that you would make it evident to them. And that they would have the courage and boldness to trust in you. And for those of us who know you already but waffle back and forth between two opinions, but limp back and forth between two opinions, I ask that we would see those other things that we worship. That you would make it clear to us what we're doing and how we're worshiping those other things. And we would bring ourselves totally into the worship of you. That we would turn over our money, our jobs, our parenting, our marriage, and every other area of our life to you. And I ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen.